I never imagined my daughter could look at me the way she did that afternoon, like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out of her life fast enough. Her voice, usually soft even when she argued, had turned sharp enough to cut through bone. Your life is nothing admirable. And honestly, don't come to my wedding. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She said it with the same tone someone might use to inform a stranger their parking meter had expired. I felt something shift inside my chest, a deep crack. Not a full break, but the kind that tells you the next hit will finish the job. For a second, I just stared at her. My daughter. The kid who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after long car rides. The young woman whose college fees I worked overtime for because I wanted her to have choices I never did. And now she was standing stiffly with her arms crossed, as if my presence contaminated the room. My throat felt tight, but when I finally spoke, my voice didn't betray me. If that's what you want, sweetheart. I walked out of her home a different man than the one who stepped in. The drive back to my place was quiet, almost eerily so. I didn't even turn on the radio. My mind was loud enough, rerunning the conversation, trying to understand when everything had started to slip between us. There wasn't one specific moment. It was like someone had been quietly loosening the bolts in my relationship with Emma for months, maybe longer. I pulled into my driveway without remembering the last 5 miles of the trip. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She'd made her choice, and whether she realized it or not, she'd pushed me toward making mine. A choice she was not going to like. A few days before that confrontation, we'd been sitting in her living room talking about the ceremony plans. Or at least I had thought we were talking. I'd mentioned the weather forecast predicting storms around the date she wanted. We should consider a tented backup, I said, just in case. You don't want guests getting soaked. Before Emma could respond, her fiancé Mark smiled in that polished, rehearsed way he always did. It was the kind of smile that felt like a performance, something he practiced in mirrors so people would think he was charming rather than calculating. Emma's mother already arranged backup marquees, he said lightly. The ones with the crystal lighting. Emma didn't even look at me when she answered him. Perfect. I knew she'd handle it. Just like that, weeks of conversations Emma and I had shared about weather concerns, intimate seating and simple decor were dismissed. Her tone, her posture. Everything about her made me feel like I was the odd piece in a puzzle that otherwise fit beautifully for her and her new family. The slight stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to stay involved anyway. You always said you wanted something more personal than those big tent setups. Mark gave a soft laugh that didn't sound amused. Personal doesn't match the event scale, Tom. 200 guests isn't exactly an intimate gathering. I lifted my chin. I've organized events at the Union Hall for larger crowds. Fundraisers, charity banquets. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Right? Things like that. I'm sure they're educational. But this is a more refined audience. For a moment, I waited for Emma to step in, to defend me, to even acknowledge how rude he was being. She didn't. Dad, it's different, she said. This isn't a potluck at the hall. It's a wedding. I felt something cold swirl in my stomach. There it was, subtle but unmistakable. Shame. My daughter was ashamed of my work, my friends, my life. I swallowed. Events aren't defined by where the workers come from. Mark leaned forward, losing the polished act completely. There's a difference between sandwiches for assembly line workers and a curated menu for professionals. That was the moment my temper flared. But even then, I didn't yell. Those assembly line workers, I said evenly, are good people, hardworking, honest, and I'm proud of them. Emma quickly rushed between us. But instead of addressing Mark's insult, she apologized to him. He didn't mean anything by it, and in that instant, something inside me shifted. A warning, a fracture, a realization. My daughter was slipping away from me, and someone else's voice was echoing through hers. She just didn't see it yet. Mark's comment hung in the air like the aftertaste of something sour. I waited for Emma to correct him, to say he'd crossed a line. Instead, she adjusted her bracelet and said calmly, Dad, this is why Mark and I needed to talk to you. You're too involved. Too involved. I repeated, feeling the room tilt a little. Emma, you and I planned this wedding together for almost a year. No, she said, and her voice sharpened. You planned it. You pushed. You kept telling stories about how things should look, what traditions matter, what Mom would have wanted. You made it all about you. Her accusation struck like a slap. I had been the one who took her to dress appointments. I had driven across 3 different counties to find the bouquet that reminded her of her mother's garden. I had worked extra shifts to make sure she could have the band she dreamed of. And now she was twisting all of that into something selfish. We never felt like you were listening, Mark added smoothly. You used your money to steer the decisions. I blinked. I used my money because you two couldn't afford the wedding you wanted. Exactly, he said, as if confirming a point in a business meeting. And that gave you leverage over Emma. Leverage. That word made me go still. I turned to Emma. Do you really believe that? She hesitated, but only for a second, and that was enough confirmation. Mark thinks. No, I said quietly. I'm asking what you think. Emma's jaw tightened. I think you're too controlling. You never once asked what Mark's family preferred. You didn't think about how your style might not fit with their expectations. My style, I echoed. You mean my life, my work boots, my friends, the things that make me who I am. She didn't deny it. My breath felt heavier than it should have been. Emma, sweetheart, I took you to venues until we found the one you loved. I said yes to a dress that cost more than my first car. I never told you no, not once. But you always guided things, she insisted, her tone icy. You'd say things like, your mom would have chosen this. That's manipulation, Dad. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I hadn't invoked her mother to guilt anyone. I spoke about her because she was part of us. Part of Emma. Losing her had shaped everything about the way I raised my daughter. Mark stepped closer, confidently now that he saw the cracks forming. Bringing up your late wife during disagreements isn't healthy. Pressures Emma. My vision went red for a moment. Don't talk about her mother like that, I said, my voice low and steady. You don't get to use her memory as ammunition. Emma rolled her eyes slightly. A tiny gesture, but one that pierced me. See? You get emotional about everything. This is exactly what I mean. For a long moment, I just stared at her. I was trying, truly trying, to understand how the girl I raised to be compassionate could become someone who saw my love as a nuisance. What happened to you? I whispered. This isn't you, Emma. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. Maybe you just never knew who I really was. Or maybe I've outgrown. All this, meaning me, my house, my job, my values. Something in me finally snapped. Not in anger, not in grief, in clarity. I wasn't losing my daughter. She had already walked away. I was just finally admitting it. Then she said the sentence that would redefine the rest of our lives. Dad, your life isn't something I'm proud of. And if you can't respect our boundaries, then don't come to the wedding. There it was. The clean break. I felt the blow like a hammer strike. But strangely, what followed wasn't rage or sorrow. It was calm, quiet, cold. All right, I said. If that's what you want. Mark looked almost victorious. Emma looked relieved, as if dismissing her father's presence at her own wedding lifted a burden she'd been carrying. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. I walked out of the house without slamming the door, without another word. My silence carried more finality than shouting ever could. The drive home was empty, hollow. But by the time I reached my kitchen, something sharper had begun filling the void. Not heartbreak, not guilt, purpose. She'd uninvited me from the wedding. She'd insulted the very life that paid for it. Fine. Then she could see what her wedding looked like without it. When I got home that night, the house felt unfamiliar. Too quiet, too neat, like I was a guest in my own life. I made a pot of coffee even though it was late, because sitting still with my thoughts would have undone me. The wedding planning binder sat on the counter where I'd left it weeks earlier. Thick, organized, labeled, color-coded. Emma always teased me about how Dad runs weddings like construction projects. She said it jokingly at the time, back when she still laughed with me. I opened it slowly, almost ceremonially. Page after page, deposits, contracts, receipts, vendor contact lists, price breakdowns. 8 months' worth of late evenings and lunch breaks spent making calls, sending emails, arranging meetings. Every signature was mine. Every down payment was mine. Every cancellation clause required my approval. And I realized something that made my pulse steady and controlled. Emma hadn't just pushed me out of her wedding. She'd forgotten I was holding the entire structure up. I took a long sip of coffee and opened the spreadsheet on my laptop, a detailed budget I'd updated more religiously than my own finances. The numbers hadn't changed since last week. $58,995 total spent. $40,000 plus of it paid by me. Every vendor booked through my account. Emma thought telling me not to come meant I'd quietly fade into the background. She thought her insult only hurt feelings. Well, she was about to learn that insults have consequences. Financial ones. I started with the venue. Rosewood Park and Gardens. Deposit. $6,000 balance due next week. $12,500 card on file mine. I called them. "This is Thomas Reynolds," I said calmly. "I need to cancel the reservation for June 14th. The coordinator gasped softly. "Oh my. Mr. Reynolds, is everything all right? Did something happen?" "Plans changed," I said simply. "I'll forfeit the deposit. Please release the remaining balance." She paused. "Of course. I'll handle it immediately. I'm sorry to hear things didn't work out." One click. Thousands saved. And Emma's dream gazebo ceremony vanished like smoke. Next was the catering. Giovanni's fine dining. $13,200 paid in full 3 weeks ago. Johnny himself answered when I called. He'd been a friend for years. We'd played cards in his back room more nights than I could count. "Tom, how's the bride-to-be?" I swallowed that question down. "I need to cancel the wedding catering." Silence. Then a slow, heavy sigh. "My friend, I won't ask. I'll refund what I can. You've already done enough. Whatever the policy allows is fine." He insisted on sending back nearly everything. I didn't argue. Thousands more returned. Then the florist. Golden Petal Studio. Premium custom order. $7,400 refundable amount. 60%. The florist apologized repeatedly for not being able to refund more. I thanked her sincerely. By the time I finished that call, the wedding's $7,400 floral fantasy became less than half that, and not Emma's. Photography, the band, the cake, the transportation. All of it followed like dominoes tumbling in slow motion. Some vendors gave partial refunds. Some gave full. A few couldn't return anything but promised to free the dates. Every call felt like removing one more brick from the tower Emma thought she'd built alone. With each one, the weight on my shoulders lifted. She had said my life wasn't something to be proud of. She had told me not to show up. Well, she was getting her wish. I got to the wedding dress invoice last. Bridal Couture Boutique. $3,800 dress paid in full. Non-refundable after alterations. A sinking feeling hit me for the first time since I'd started. That dress had been the best moment we'd shared during the entire planning process. Emma cried when she saw herself in the mirror. She said it looked like the lace from her mother's wedding photo. But it was mine, paid by me, and she didn't want me involved in anything anymore. So I called the boutique. "It's already altered," the seamstress said apologetically. "We can't refund it." "That's fine," I replied. "I'll pick it up tomorrow." Not to hurt Emma. Not to spite her, but because it belonged to me now, just like every other part of the wedding she'd rejected. By the time I closed the binder, more than $40,000 had come back to my accounts. That money represented years of sweat, sacrifice, and overtime shifts. Money Emma no longer valued because she no longer valued the person behind it. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, I didn't feel drained or defeated. I felt clear. She wanted independence. She wanted a wedding without her father's influence. Then she was about to see exactly what that looked like. My phone started buzzing before the sun even went down that evening. First, I let it ring. I sat at the table with my coffee going cold beside me, staring at the refund confirmations popping into my email one after another. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't revenge either. It was something quieter, like exhaling a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. Then my phone buzzed again. And again. Emma. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through, her voice shaky and too high-pitched. Dad. The venue just called me and said the booking was canceled. Why would you do that? Call me back. Please. I set the phone down without responding. 2 minutes later, another voicemail. This isn't funny. You're being unreasonable. You can't just unilaterally undo everything. We had contracts. We had contracts. No, I had contracts. I had signed every single one. Then another message, her voice escalating. Mark says you're having an emotional meltdown and lashing out. He thinks you're overwhelmed. He says we should try to talk you down. Dad, please call me. We can fix this. Talk me down. Like I was some distressed stranger on a ledge. I deleted that one instantly. More calls came from unknown numbers, probably vendors trying to verify the cancellation notices. I ignored them all. They already had my confirmation, and I wasn't obligated to soothe the chaos Emma had created. By the time I turned off the phone for the night, I'd received 14 missed calls. Not a single one contained an apology. Not for her words. Not for her cruelty. Not for telling me my life, everything I worked for, was worthless. Just panic over her wedding. The next morning, I was in my garage, reorganizing my toolbox. It was one of those long overdue tasks that felt strangely grounding. Sorting bolts by size, lining up socket wrenches, wiping down shelves. It brought a sense of order back to a world that had been shaken loose. I just finished labeling a drawer when I heard car doors slam outside. 2 doors. Not one. I peeked through the garage window. Emma's silver sedan. And right behind it, Mark's glossy black SUV. Of course, they couldn't possibly let things sit for more than 12 hours without staging an intervention. Emma's heels clicked frantically on the concrete as she rushed toward my front door. Mark followed behind her at a slower, sauntering pace, hands in pockets, playing the composed adult in a crisis he created. The doorbell rang. Once, twice, then a third time, long and sharp. Dad, I know you're home. The truck is in the driveway. Open the door. Same demanding tone she used as a teenager when she wanted permission to break curfew. Some habits don't change. I wiped my hands on a rag, took my time walking through the house, and finally opened the door. Emma stood there with mascara smudged beneath her eyes, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Something fancy and expensive looking, probably chosen to impress Mark's parents. She'd obviously been crying. Good. Not because I wanted to see her hurt, but because maybe, just maybe, she was starting to feel the weight of her decisions. Mark hovered just behind her with his arms crossed, wearing an expression caught between annoyance and superiority. Dad, Emma said, voice trembling. We need to talk. No, Mark cut in. We need to have an adult conversation. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Emma pushed her hair back with a shaky hand. What you did yesterday was insane. You canceled everything. The venue, the florist. Dad, Giuseppe called me at 7 this morning because he thought something terrible happened. Something did, I said calmly. You told me not to come to your wedding, so I removed myself from it. You know that's not what I meant, she snapped. It's exactly what you said. Mark stepped forward, lowering his voice like he was a mediator at a corporate dispute. Tom, let's not escalate. You were hurt. You acted out. Now we're here to resolve things. Resolve things. He really thought he could spin this into a negotiation. Is Emma upset because she wants her father there? I asked. Or because she now has to explain to your parents why the 5-star venue is gone? Emma flushed, her eyes darting away. She didn't deny it. I opened the door wider. Come in, then. Let's have this adult conversation. They sat on the couch. Emma perched on the edge like she might spring forward at any second, Mark reclining with calculated ease. I took the armchair across from them. So, I said, folding my hands. Talk. Emma's composure collapsed. How could you do this to me? She burst out. The florist was crying. The band canceled. None of them will take us back on short notice. You ruined everything. No, I answered evenly. I simply stepped out. The same way you told me to. Emma covered her face with her hands. Mark rubbed her shoulder, glaring at me as if I were the unreasonable one. You're acting vindictive, he accused. You're punishing Emma for expressing honesty. I stared at him, the absurdity almost funny. Honesty? My daughter had told me her father was an embarrassment. And somehow I was the one at fault? Mark's accusation hung in the air like a bad smell. Thick, sour, and impossible to ignore. You're punishing her, he said again, slower this time, as if repetition would somehow make his version of reality true. I leaned back in my chair, studying him, calm, silent, letting the weight of the moment stretch. Punishing her? I finally repeated. No, Mark. I'm simply respecting her boundaries. Emma lifted her head from her hands. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks like smudged charcoal. Dad, please don't play games. This isn't funny. My wedding is in 2 weeks. We don't have a venue. We don't have food. The florist can't reorder anything in time. That's unfortunate, I said evenly. But not my doing. Her voice cracked. You canceled everything. You asked me to step back. I corrected. I did exactly that. Mark scoffed. That's not what she meant, and you know it. Ah, I said quietly. So now I'm supposed to interpret her insults in the most charitable way possible? Forgive me if I take your life is nothing to be proud of at face value. Emma flinched like I'd struck her. Mark stood abruptly. Tom, let's not drag emotions into this. You're overreacting. Weddings are stressful. People say things they don't mean. Move past it. I turned my attention to him, eyebrows raised. Did she say she didn't mean it? Emma opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her throat bobbed in a hard swallow. She knew. She knew she had crossed a line she couldn't talk her way out of. I reached beside my chair and lifted the wedding planning binder. Thick, heavy, stuffed with every detail of the last 8 months. When I placed it on the coffee table, both of them tensed. I take notes, I said. Always have. Emma wiped under her eyes nervously. Dad, please don't. I flipped the binder open to a page I'd marked with a blue tab. You called me 2 weeks ago. I began, reading directly from the page. You said, and I quote, Mark thinks the decor Dad picked out is too working class for his family. Emma's face drained of color. She had forgotten I wrote things down. Forgotten that I listened. That's not, Dad, that wasn't. I held up a hand to stop her. Then, 3 weeks before that, you told me Mark's mother suggested changing the menu because Giovanni's feels too ethnic. Again, your words. Their opinions. Mark stiffened. You're twisting. No, I said quietly. I'm revealing. I flipped to another page. And last month, when I recommended a local musician, you told me Mark's father said live bands from small towns lack refinement. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. She hadn't realized how much of their subtle jabs had slipped into her conversations with me. But they had. Every whisper, every criticism they filtered through her, I had recorded because that's what a man who builds things for a living does. He pays attention to the details. Mark tried to regain control. You're interpreting everything in the worst possible light. I could interpret it, I said. Or I could simply observe. I closed the binder slowly. Somewhere along the way, I continued. My daughter forgot who loved her first, and she let people who barely know her rewrite the story of her life. Emma shook her head violently. That's not true. You're making this sound like a conspiracy. Is it? I asked. Or is it just easier for you to believe I'm the problem instead of admitting you changed? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Dad, she whispered, voice trembling. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean the things I said. I was frustrated and stressed and... Good, I said gently. Then you can say the words. She blinked. What words? That you were wrong. For a moment, dead silence. Then she inhaled sharply, as if the request physically hurt her. Mark stepped forward immediately. She doesn't need to degrade herself to soothe your ego. I laughed once, harsh and humorless. Her ego is what steered us here. No, Mark said, jaw tightening. Your pride did. Interesting, I muttered. I always thought pride involved pretending you were better than someone else. Which, come to think of it, is exactly what your family has done since day one. Emma's hands curled into fists. Dad, please stop. This isn't helping. Helping? I repeated. Emma, I'm not here to help reconstruct a wedding you dismantled with one sentence. I'm here because you showed up on my doorstep demanding the benefits of a relationship you no longer respect. Her breath hitched. She finally seemed to understand. Respect wasn't something she could simply reclaim because she needed me now. Dad, she whispered. Don't do this. I stood slowly. You told me my life wasn't something to be proud of, I said quietly. But you forgot. My life paid for your future, and my absence is now costing you its foundation. Emma's lips trembled. Mark glared like he wanted to lunge across the room, but neither of them spoke. For a long moment, none of us moved. The tension in the room felt thick enough to slice through. Emma's face was blotchy from crying. Mascara streaked like muddy rivers down her cheeks. Mark's jaw worked back and forth, a tic he had whenever someone wasn't agreeing with him fast enough. I stood there, not out of anger, but because a strange calm had settled over me. The kind that only comes after you've finally stopped pretending everything is fine. Emma seemed to sense something had shifted. Her voice was almost a whisper. Dad, tell me we can fix this. Please. I exhaled slowly. No, sweetheart. We can't. Her shoulders collapsed. Why? I said I was sorry. You said words, I replied gently. Not accountability. Not understanding. You haven't once acknowledged how deeply you cut me. She shook her head desperately. I didn't mean it. I was overwhelmed. No, I said more firmly this time. You meant it in the moment. That's the truth people speak under pressure. You meant the insult. That's why it came so easily. Mark stepped forward, bristling. You don't get to keep weaponizing her emotions. She apologized. A decent man would accept that. I stared at him evenly. A decent man wouldn't manipulate a woman into believing her father is beneath her. But we're clearly working from different definitions. His nostrils flared. He looked ready to fire back, but Emma touched his arm, silently pleading with him not to escalate. I walked around the coffee table, closing the binder with quiet finality. The wedding, I said, is off. Emma blinked. Off as in postponed? No. She swallowed hard. Dad, stop joking. I'm not joking. The wedding is cancelled. Permanently. Her mouth fell open. Not a soft gasp, but a stunned, soundless shock, as if the ground had tilted under her. You can't do that, she whispered. I already did, I answered. Yesterday. Every contract. Every vendor. Every payment. It's done. Mark let out a humorless laugh. You're bluffing. I opened my phone, turning the screen toward them. Email after email. Refunds. Confirmations. Termination notices. A digital trail of my final decision. Emma stared like she'd been punched. Dad, why would you do this? It's my wedding. And you told me I wasn't welcome in it. That was a mistake. A terrible one. She grabbed my hands, gripping tightly. Please, please, I'll say whatever you want. I'll apologize however you want. Just help me fix this. Her desperation wasn't rooted in love. It wasn't even about me. It was about saving face, saving her event, saving her image in front of Mark's family. I pulled my hands back gently. This isn't about punishing you, Emma. This is about reality. You wanted distance? You have it. You said my life wasn't worthy? Fine. Then it won't support yours anymore. Her voice cracked into a sob. Dad, you are ruining my life. I leaned on the back of the armchair. I funded the life you're building. You just didn't realize how much until now. Mark stepped up again, eyes narrowed. Let me be perfectly clear. Emma and I are still getting married. Whether you approve or not. I nodded. I believe you will. But not the wedding you planned. And not with my involvement. We'll find new vendors, he snapped. Good, I said. Pay for them. His jaw clenched. He hadn't expected that answer. He expected begging, bargaining, guilt. Instead, he got my indifference. You're a selfish old man, he said. Emma deserves better. I shrugged. Funny. That's exactly what I've been thinking too. Emma inhaled sharply, as if those words pierced her. I softened my tone, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. I love you, Emma. I always will. But love isn't a free pass to disrespect the people who raised you. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then whispered, Dad, I don't know why everything spiraled like this. I do, I answered. You let someone convince you that your father's loyalty was a liability instead of a gift. Her eyes flicked toward Mark, and for a brief second, just a flicker, something uncertain crossed her face. Doubt. Maybe the first genuine doubt she'd allowed herself in months. Mark noticed it too. His eyes narrowed at her sharply, possessively. He didn't like that she was wavering. I turned toward the door. I think this conversation is over. Emma's voice cracked behind me. Dad, please don't walk away. But she had walked away first. She just hadn't recognized that truth until now. I opened the front door, gesturing politely. You two should go. Mark stormed past me, muttering something under his breath. Emma lingered, trembling, searching my face for any sign I'd change my mind. Not this time. She finally stepped outside, tears streaming silently. As the door closed behind them, I felt a calmness I hadn't felt in months. Not victory, not spite, just peace. The days that followed were strangely quiet for me, but not for Emma. I didn't have to hunt for updates or gossip. Small towns have their own circulatory system, and word travels through it faster than blood. I'd go to the hardware store or grab a coffee, and someone would inevitably clear their throat and say something like, Hey, heard things got complicated with Emma's wedding. Everything okay? Then they'd lean in, lowering their voice as if the walls themselves might tattle. People weren't being nosy. They were worried. They'd watched Emma grow up. They'd seen me raise her alone after her mother died. And now they'd watched everything fall apart in real time. The first real news came from Mrs. Henderson, the florist's assistant, who called me just to check in. She didn't ask directly about the conflict. But she didn't have to. She came back 3 times, she said softly. Emma. She tried to reorder everything, but peonies can't be rushed like that. She was crying, Tom. I felt awful. I thanked her for the update, though I didn't know what to do with it. Sympathy was still difficult to muster. Pain alone doesn't erase cruelty. Later that same day, Johnny from the restaurant caught me outside the grocery store. He put a hand on my shoulder the way only old friends can. She begged me to make something work, he said. She offered half the price, then asked for a payment plan. I told her I couldn't. I felt terrible, but it wasn't right. I nodded. You did the right thing. But when I got home, I sat in my quiet kitchen longer than I meant to. Johnny wasn't the emotional type, and hearing it from him hit harder than I expected. Then came the call from Jake, the photographer. He didn't mince words. She said she'd pay double, he told me. Triple if I had to. I told her no, Tom. Not after the way she treated you. Jake had always been direct like that. Still, I felt something tighten in my chest. I didn't want people punishing Emma on my behalf. That wasn't what any of this was supposed to be. But the damage was done. She was on her own, like she insisted. Her attempts to salvage the wedding continued to spread across town like wildfire. She tried booking the community center. She tried assembling decorations from dollar store supplies. She tried begging vendors for whatever scraps of availability they had. She tried to spin the situation to Mark's relatives, telling them there had been a change of plans. But they were too proud and too perceptive to buy the lie. People who attended church with her grandmother whispered that Emma had been spotted crying in her car outside the old chapel, asking if they could maybe squeeze in a quick ceremony. Her aunt told the story to 3 different people. By the next morning, everyone knew. She even tried to enlist a local DJ to fill in for the band I canceled. He turned her down too, not because he disliked her, but because he knew it wasn't right. "Your dad's a good man," he told her. "You should fix things with him first." She left crying. Meanwhile, the calls to my phone multiplied. At first she was angry. "You humiliated us. This is your fault. You're acting childish." Then the tone shifted. "Dad, please. I can't fix this alone. Mark's parents are furious. They think I lied. People are talking about us. You're making me look bad." Then finally, the desperation. "Dad, I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart. Please, I need you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." But apologies given out of panic aren't apologies. They're bandages slapped on a wound still infected. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. Not to punish her. But because silence was the only thing left that could teach her the difference between love and entitlement. Then came the day of the wedding that wasn't. I sat in my living room drinking coffee while the morning sun streamed through the window. I wasn't dressed for a wedding anymore. Not in a suit. Not in anything ceremonial. I wore jeans and an old t-shirt and felt more peaceful than I had in a long time. Around noon, Tony dropped by with a box of pastries. "Figured you might need company," he said gruffly. We talked for a while about ordinary things. Work, cars, the neighborhood, the upcoming fishing season. And as he was walking out the door, he paused. "You did what needed to be done," he said. "Sometimes letting someone hit bottom is the only way they learn what the ground feels like." After he left, I stood at the window a long time, looking at the empty driveway where Emma's car used to sit every Sunday. And for the first time since she told me not to come to her wedding, I wondered if she'd show up anyway. I wasn't planning on going anywhere near the community center that afternoon. I told myself I'd stay home, maybe watch a game, maybe clean the garage again. Anything to keep my hands busy. But around 2 o'clock, something made me get in my truck. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe some leftover instinct that still flickered inside me, the one that used to make me get up at 2 a.m. when she had nightmares. Whatever it was, I found myself driving toward the Riverbend Community Center. The sad, brick building wedged between a tax office and a laundromat. The place people used for bake sales, PTA meetings, and bingo nights. Not weddings. When I pulled up across the street, the parking lot looked half empty despite the number of invitations they'd sent. A handful of cars were parked crookedly, like their owners weren't sure they wanted to stay long. I saw Mark's parents first. They stepped out of a gleaming Mercedes, dressed like they were attending an awards gala instead of a last-minute ceremony in a building with flickering lights. His mother stiffened immediately, holding her handbag closer. "This can't be the right place," she murmured loudly, her voice carrying across the lot. Her husband muttered something under his breath, and she clutched her pearls with such exaggerated horror that I almost laughed. Almost. Guests trickled in slowly, each wearing the same confused expression. They had all expected the original venue, the gardens, the fountains, the white gazebo. Instead, they got a building with peeling paint and a sign that still advertised last month's elementary school talent show. I stayed across the street, watching. Then Emma arrived. She pulled up in her cousin's dented pickup truck, the passenger door squeaking when she climbed out. She wasn't glowing the way brides usually do. Her shoulders were hunched, her face puffy from crying. The gown she wore, the one I had paid for, still looked beautiful, but something was off. The hem was uneven, clearly altered in a rush. It looked wrong on her, like wearing the right dress on the wrong life. And she looked small, so much smaller than she had ever seemed before. She climbed out holding what should have been a lush bouquet but was instead a bunch of limp grocery store flowers wrapped in foil. She stared at them as if hoping they would miraculously transform into the arrangement she'd always dreamed of. They didn't. She tried to fluff them up, tried to rearrange the petals, tried to hide how badly things had fallen apart. Then she turned and saw me. Her whole face changed. Not in anger or shock this time, but something softer. Something close to hope. She walked toward me slowly, each step cautious, like approaching a wild animal she didn't want to startle. "Dad," she whispered when she reached the sidewalk. "You came." "I wasn't going to," I said honestly. "But I wanted to see how you were doing." She swallowed. Her eyes glistened. "Does this mean, maybe, you forgive me?" I glanced toward the community center. Mark stood at the front doors, pacing, checking his watch. His tux didn't fit him right, probably rented last minute. The officiant beside him looked confused, flipping through some papers nervously. Guests were peering out the windows, sensing tension. I turned back to Emma. "This is what you wanted," I said quietly. "A wedding without my involvement, without my name on anything, without my influence." Her chin trembled. "Dad, please, don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" I asked. "That you told me I embarrassed you? That my life wasn't worth being proud of? That I wasn't welcome?" She closed her eyes. "I know what I said was unforgivable." "No," I replied. "It's not unforgivable. It's unforgettable." Her eyes snapped open, stricken. "Dad, I didn't mean it. I was angry. I let other people get in my head. I was stupid." "That," I said quietly, "is the first honest thing you've said in months." She let out a shaky breath. "So, can we fix this?" I stepped closer, just enough for her to hear me but not enough to give her false hope. "You can fix yourself," I said. "Fix your choices. Fix the way you let people treat you. But this wedding, this version of your life, that's yours to carry, not mine." She looked like the world was collapsing beneath her feet. "Dad, please. I need you." "You needed me 8 months ago," I said. "You needed me the day you let him talk down to me. You needed me the moment you repeated his family's insults like they were facts." Her face twisted. "Dad, I don't want to walk down that aisle without you." "You already did," I said softly. "The moment you chose pride over family." She broke then, completely. Tears spilled freely, streaking down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying and failing to hold herself together. It hurt to watch, but truth often does. Behind her, the doors opened. Mark was storming out, ready to demand why she hadn't followed him inside. He looked furious, but when he saw her collapsed in front of me, hurting, questioning, doubting, his expression slipped. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing her. Fear of losing control. Mark came stomping across the parking lot like a man storming into a meeting he intended to dominate. His bow tie was crooked, his face red, and he looked less like a groom and more like someone whose plans were unraveling faster than he could catch them. "Emma!" he snapped, not even glancing at me. "What are you doing out here? We start in 10 minutes. You're making us look ridiculous." Her head jerked up at his tone. I saw it, the flicker of fear, the unsteady breath, the subtle step backward. She'd heard him speak sharply before, but never with an audience. She tried to compose herself, wiping her cheeks. I just needed a minute." "A minute?" he hissed. "My parents are inside wondering why the place looks like a community bake sale and why the bride is missing." Emma flinched as though the words hit her physically. He still didn't acknowledge me. That was his biggest mistake. "Mark," I said quietly. He snapped his head toward me like he'd only just realized I existed. "This is none of your business." I chuckled softly. "It's entirely my business when you talk to my daughter like that." Emma's lips parted. Something in her expression shifted, an old familiarity, like she hadn't heard someone defend her in a long time. Mark scoffed. "Oh, please. You've done enough damage. You don't get to play hero now." "Hero?" I stepped forward. "No, but I'm still her father." He stepped closer too, puffing up like a rooster. "You aren't part of this wedding. You removed yourself when you canceled everything like a petty child." "No," I corrected. "Emma removed me when she said I wasn't welcome. I simply followed instructions." Emma covered her mouth again, the weight of her own words closing in on her. Mark scoffed. She was emotional. You're supposed to be the adult. And you, I said, are supposed to be a partner. He stiffened. I am. No, I said evenly. You're a foreman. You dictate. You direct. You manipulate. A partner stands beside someone, not above them. Emma closed her eyes, tears slipping out again. She knew it. She finally recognized the truth. She just hadn't wanted to admit it. Mark laughed bitterly. Spare me the lecture. Emma and I don't need your approval. You sure about that? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, she doesn't look like a woman excited to walk down the aisle. She looks like someone being shoved toward a cliff. Emma's voice broke. Mark, we need to talk. He spun on her. You don't get to do this right now. My parents are inside. The guests are inside. We go in there, get married, and deal with your father's tantrum later. I felt something inside me twist. He didn't see Emma, not as a person, not as a partner. She was an accessory, a piece of his future resume, a trophy he believed he deserved. Emma stared at him, trembling. It's not a tantrum, he scoffed. Of course it is. You're just too emotional to see it. And there it was. The moment the final puzzle piece clicked into place. Emma's breath hitched. Her hands balled into fists, and she stepped slightly away from him, so subtly he almost didn't notice. But he did. Emma, he said sharply. Don't start this. Not here. Not now. She turned her head slowly toward me. Her eyes were full of disbelief and something that almost looked like grief. Dad, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I know, I said softly. Her chin quivered. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I tried, I said. But you heard his voice louder than mine. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she reached for me, not as the man who could fix her wedding, not as the wallet funding her dreams, but as her father. Mark's face contorted with panic. Emma, we're leaving. Right now. She didn't move. He grabbed her wrist. Not hard, not violently, not enough to cause pain. But enough. Enough for a flash of fear to flicker across her face. Enough to show her something she had never wanted to believe. Her voice was barely audible. Mark, let go. He hesitated. A split second. But too long. I stepped forward immediately, my voice low and sharp. You heard her. He dropped her wrist like it burned him and turned on me. You've been poisoning her against me since the beginning, he snarled. No, I said. You did that yourself. Emma stared between us, torn but awakening, finally seeing the truth that was right in front of her. The truth she had been trained to ignore. The truth she had dismissed me for. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I don't think I can do this. Mark froze. Do what? This, she said, motioning toward the building. Us. All of it. His mouth fell open. You're calling off the wedding? Because of him? No, she whispered, stepping behind me. Because of you. Mark blinked at Emma like he couldn't comprehend what had just come out of her mouth. His face went from shock to rage so quickly it was almost impressive. He pointed at me with a trembling hand. This is your fault, he spat. He manipulated you. He set this up. He wants you miserable so he can play victim. Emma stepped closer to me, not dramatically, just enough to make her allegiance unmistakable. No, she said quietly. Dad didn't manipulate me. He didn't tell me what to think. He didn't threaten me. He didn't grab my wrist. Mark opened his mouth, but she cut him off. You did. The parking lot had gone silent. Guests inside the community center had noticed something unfolding and were now peering out the windows. Word was spreading. Heads were popping out the door. Mark's parents stood frozen at the entrance. His father stone-faced, his mother clutching her purse like it might shield her from scandal. Emma wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. I can't marry someone who looks at me like a pawn. I can't marry someone who talks down to my father. Someone who cares more about appearances than people. Mark's jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? After everything I've done for you? You mean everything my dad did for us? She corrected softly. Everything you took credit for. He let out a short, breathless laugh, half disbelief, half fury. So what? You're choosing him over me? I stayed silent. This wasn't my moment. This was hers. I'm choosing myself, she whispered. And I don't even recognize myself when I'm with you. For a moment, Mark just stared. His eyes darted between us, his composure unraveling thread by thread. Then he snapped. You two deserve each other, he said, voice shaking. Enjoy your pathetic little lives. He turned and marched toward his parents, who immediately rushed to him. His mother shot me a glare that could curdle milk, but his father looked relieved. Or maybe he just understood the disaster they had narrowly avoided tying their son to. Within minutes, Mark and his family were in the Mercedes, tires squealing as they tore out of the parking lot. Silence settled once more. Emma stood still for a long moment, staring at the empty road where Mark's car had disappeared. Her shoulders rose and fell in a shaky exhale. Then she broke. Not in a dramatic collapse, not in sobs that shook her entire body. Just a soft, exhausted cry, the kind that comes after months of holding everything in. She turned to me slowly. Dad, what have I done? I stepped closer and rested a hand on her shoulder. You stopped a mistake. That's what you did. Her voice wavered. I hurt you. I hurt myself. I hurt everyone trying to help me. Yes, I said honestly. But now you see it. And that's the first step to fixing anything. She leaned into me, just slightly, like a child seeking comfort from a storm she didn't expect. It wasn't the same as before, not trust restored, not forgiveness granted. But it was something fragile and real, a beginning, not an ending. Inside the community center, people were stirring awkwardly, the sound of folding chairs scraping, guests whispering, Mark's absence spreading through them like a gust of cold wind. Jake, the photographer, stepped outside with his camera slung around his neck. When he saw Emma crying beside me, he nodded once with sympathy and retreated inside. No one judged her. They didn't need to. Life was doing that well enough. Emma finally pulled back, wiping her face with trembling fingers. What do I do now? You go inside, I said gently. Tell them the truth. Tell them the wedding is off. And then, I said, you start rebuilding, one relationship at a time, beginning with yourself. She nodded slowly. There was no dramatic surge of courage, no triumphant music, just a quiet, tired acceptance of reality. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into the community center. Gasps echoed inside. Conversations halted. Her closest friends rushed toward her, and she collapsed into their arms, sobbing. I stayed outside. Some moments belong to a father, some belong to a daughter, and some require space for a person to rediscover who they are without someone else's shadow over them. After a few minutes, Emma came back out. Her face was red, her eyes swollen, but something in her expression was clearer, cleaner. Dad, she said softly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. We still have a long way to go. She nodded. Then, can we start somewhere small? Maybe talk? Just talk. I smiled faintly. We can do that. We walked to my truck together, not as father and bride, not as enemies, not as broken people trying to compensate, but as two humans finally ready to speak honestly. The wedding ended that day, but something else began. A chance at rebuilding the relationship she nearly threw away. A chance at repairing wounds that needed air to heal. And a chance for Emma to understand the truth she'd lost sight of. Pride builds distance. Love builds bridges.